Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. The first 2 weeks have been a whirlwind in the Texas legislature, and we are going to break down all the various things happening and the dominoes that have fallen since the election of Dustin Burrows as Speaker. The Texas Senate is already hosting hearings for legislation that they hope to vote out quickly next week after the governor actually identifies certain conservative policies as emergency items, while the Texas House is giving Democrats more power, and we're going to explain exactly how they did it. Let's get to the show. When Dustin Burrows was running for Speaker, he said that he believed the Texas House should get to vote on banning Democrat chairs, that he didn't want to take a position, that he thought the rules were something that the members got to decide. So he, as Speaker, wouldn't want to insert himself in that process. That's what he said. And they asked him about different stuff. He said, it would be inappropriate for me to comment on these rules. The implication from Representative Burrows at the time was that the legislature as members should discuss and debate the rules and they should decide. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale. After he's elected with the vast majority of his support coming from Democrats, he had a problem. And his problem was that he wanted to find a way to ban Democrat chairs. There were 8. He wanted to ban Democrat chairs while at the same time giving Democrats something. And in whatever they were going to give Democrats, they needed to make sure that the Republicans that just voted for him for Speaker didn't have to actually cast a vote on if they supported the power that they were going to give Democrats. And so what I'm going to explain to you is exactly how they went about banning Democrat chairs in such a way that every Democrat, except for one, would vote to ban Democrat chairs. And then his Republicans would have some protection for the new power they gave to Democrats, because they would be able to say, oh, I just tried to pass a Republican priority. I can't help it. What is so encouraging before we get into this is just how many of you, the grassroots in Texas, didn't fall for the game. I really am encouraged by just how engaged and in tune the average Texan is with what the heck is going on in the Texas House. So again, understanding how this starts and what their goal is gives you a lot more context into why they went about doing what they did. So when the rules were sent out, they were sent out Thursday morning at 4:20 a.m. 4:20 a.m. The members get the rules. The day before, I know multiple different conservative staffers who were calling the Speaker's office just saying, hey, are we debating the rules tomorrow? And they kept saying, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. And then when the rules come in at 4:20 a.m., the assumption is we're probably debating them Friday at this point. Maybe we'll kick them to Monday. And instead, they're told, no, we're debating those this afternoon. The ones you just got at 4:20 a.m. So members are given 200 pages of rules, and they have to go through it. And they have to look at every little addition to the rules, every change. And they have to go to the floor that afternoon and debate them. Now, there's certain things in the rules that we could discuss, but the core of it came down to this. Instead of letting the body vote up or down on whether they wanted to ban Democrat chairs or not, what House leadership did is they put a ban in Democrat chairs. They said, we are not going to let Democrats chair committees, but we are going to mandate that every vice chair be a Democrat. Okay. In the Texas Senate, 25% of the vice chairs are Democrats. Now, last session, if somebody were to tell you, oh, I'm the vice chair of state affairs, that does give you a title, but it doesn't actually give you any power. And that is why the grassroots and the Republican Party of Texas and other people have not said Democrats cannot be vice chairs. None of us have ever talked about Democrats not being vice chairs. And if you're wondering why, the answer is because a vice chair, until Burrows cut his deal with Democrats, was nothing more than a title. They couldn't do anything. They didn't get any staff. They just were the vice chair. And when the chair walked away, the vice chair would take the gavel and help organize the meeting. And so Republicans rightfully said, we're not just trying to take titles from Democrats. We just don't want them to have power. That's what the Democrat chair fight has been a bit about. Democrats are given too much power in the Texas House of Representatives. Well, what leadership does is they put the Democrat chair ban in the rules that they send out at 420, but then they also say, oh, by the way, it is now mandated in the rules that every single vice chair be a Democrat. Oh, and by the way, a vice chair is no longer a title. It is a powerful position. They inserted in the rules a lot of power to all of these Democrats. And here's what they said. So in the Texas House last session or the Texas Senate, there was no mandate that Democrats were vice chairs. There were just some Democrat vice chairs. So in these rules, it says every vice chair has to be from the minority party. Then it says, and that's never been the way people have argued it. Nobody ever asked for vice chairs to be mandated, except I'm assuming for Democrats. And I will say this. Let's say vice chairs were, like they are in the Senate or in the House for every session I've ever watched the House, not powerful positions. Let's say Dustin Burrows and his team said, hey, we're just going to mandate that vice chairs be Democrats. Okay, you could disagree with that. I would disagree with that, but I probably wouldn't say that's a horrible deal. I might say there's no reason for you to mandate. Why don't you as the speaker just make them all Democrats? And I think that's actually what Dustin was trying to protect himself from. He wanted to be able to say, the House voted for me to make all these vice chairs Democrats. They said they wanted it. All of them did. But even if that mandate was there, the mandate alone is not a bad deal for Republicans because vice chairs can't do anything. Well, they couldn't do anything. So now let's talk about what they're going to get in the Texas House. First, they are going to be able to force a bill to receive a hearing. Okay. And this is literally in the rules. It says that a Democrat, when they ask a bill to receive a hearing, that bill shall be granted a hearing promptly. Okay? Promptly. So I can actually just read the rule for you if you want, but it literally says measures or matters designated by the vice chair are promptly scheduled for a public hearing under this rule. That's what it says. They are. And this is a significant amount of power. A committee, if they meet once a week and they start meeting in early to mid-February, let's assume, they're only going to be meeting to hear House bills until early April, mid-April. They do not have a significant amount of time. So it's February, March, and April. And at some point, they're going to run out of time where even if they do pass a bill out, it can't even be considered by the calendars committee in time. And then subsequently, they will have Senate bills at that point that they can hear in the latter part of the session that they can still pass out onto the floor. But even at that time, it's only a couple more weeks of hearings that they can have on certain Senate bills. So if they have a weekly meeting and you have max 12 committee hearings that you can hear legislation in, and Democrats can now get legislation placed on the calendar for a hearing, they are going to have the authority to eat up a significant amount of time that they weren't able to eat up. We've talked about in the past how the Texas House plays the clock out and just, quote unquote, runs out of time to pass all these conservative policies. And now they're giving every Democrat, by the way, they've just mandated that all the vice chairs are Democrats, and those vice chairs can schedule hearings for bills. Also, a vice chair can order an impact study. They can have an impact study commissioned against a bill they don't like. So they could basically say, I want this bill to say that if passed, it's going to have all these negative effects. Vice chairs can invite testimony. Again, a vice chair could ask a chair, hey, I'd like these people to testify for this bill. But now they can not only set some really progressive bill for a hearing, they can also say, oh, and these 10 people need to be invited for this bill. And they're going to be given an unspecified amount of money that will likely amount to millions of dollars. They are going to be given an unspecified amount of money amounting to millions of dollars. And that unspecifiedness is what we're actually going to come back to in a second, because that will get us to the housekeeping resolution. But before we come back to the housekeeping resolution, let's finish out the rules debate. So I want to go to a quick clip of how Todd Hunter rolls out his rules, because it's really important for the motion that gets made. So let's go to Representative Hunter's opening to the rules package.
These rules, everybody got at the same time. Even the Speaker of the House had not seen what was filed. And the reason is I felt that it was important that we 150 members receive everything at the same time.
So Chairman Hunter basically says, hey guys, I know you're all running around trying to figure out all these deals. I mean, literally at 6 and 7 in the morning, people are reading these rules going, oh, a vice chair could never do that. Oh, a vice chair could never do that. They're calling people, they're meeting. Everybody's trying to figure out what's all this power that Democrats have. So what happens is amendments are filed to the rules. And the reason amendments are filed to the rules is so you could have an up or down vote on those amendments. And Mitch Little had an amendment that simply in the section of the rules where all this new power was given to Democrat vice chairs, added in a line that simply made it clear that all of these things were not things they could just do, but with the permission of the chair, they could do. So basically, it's implying that they should be taken more seriously, but the chair is ultimately the one that will decide if the bill gets a hearing or not, which would just make sure that Democrats can't use this power. It would really say they don't have the power. They just, again, have the title. And if they ask for these things, the chair, if they give it to them, can do so. If a vote is taken on that amendment, here's Dustin Burrows' problem and his team. All of his team needs to vote to kill any amendment that's going to take Democrat power away. And then on their record, they will then have voted to give Democrats all this power. Then they have to own it. Then it's their responsibility, right? Then they have to be the reason that all these committees are happening, which, by the way, they still will be. But I'll explain kind of how they figured they'd really get around it. And so amendments are being filed. That's just one of many amendments that are being filed to the rules, all that are going to be considered and voted on. And again, Dustin Burrows said, I don't want to put my thumb on the scale. I want the members to decide the rules. And then Todd Hunter says, well, the members all got the rules at the same time at 4:20 a.m. and we're debating it right now. And then before any amendments voted on, Representative Jared Patterson gets up and says, I'm going to move the previous question. Now, moving the previous question is something that happens once or twice a session. Once or twice a session. And it typically happens on a controversial piece of legislation like an immigration bill, where Democrats will offer like 68 amendments to this bill. And they will go I don't know, 8 hours. It's like 2 or 3 in the morning. And eventually Republicans say, we fully debated this. Every one of these amendments keep going down on the same margin. So I think we know that this is going to be the final bill. Let's just move on. That's the idea behind moving the previous question. We've debated this issue to death. It's time to move on. But it was 3 p.m., not 3 a.m. And there weren't 68 amendments that had been voted on. There were 0 amendments being voted on. This didn't have to do with the Texas House conducting itself in the way it has in the past under Strauss and Bonin and Dade. This was a new message, an era where Burrows has promised these 30 Republicans that helped him cut the deal with Democrats, hey, I've got your back. I'm going to protect you. And the only way to protect them is to do things that have never been done before. So they move the previous question, which says, hey, we're skipping all the amendments. We're not voting on anything. We want to vote up or down on whether these rules pass or fail. And Jared Patterson gets up. Now, oddly, in his layout, which we will get to with Gene Wu's words here in just a moment, he says these rules represent a coalition that has given a little and taken a little to do the work of the Texas House. Now, it's kind of odd that Jared says we're ready to move on because we've already given a little and taken a little in what the rules are before you, because according to Todd Hunter, none of them saw the rules until 4:20 in the morning. So what negotiation happened? You couldn't have had a negotiation before, according to Representative Hunter. And if you had a negotiation after, nothing changed because none of the words changed. So nobody gave and took. You just looked at it and I guess agreed these are good rules. So what happens is that motion passes with a Democrat and Republican coalition. And you might say, well, why would Democrats vote to end debate? And the reason they would is because these rules give them the maximum amount of power they're going to have that day. If any of these amendments are voted on, each of these amendments make things better for Republicans and the majority party. And so they're like, we'll shut down debate any day if we feel like we've gotten something good out of this and it's as good as we're going to get it. And then Republicans are saying, we don't want to debate this because then we're going to have to debate each and every one of these items. We don't want to do that. So the rules pass, and of course, every Dustin Burrows Republican posts, we ban Democrat chairs. We ban Democrat chairs in all caps and exclamation marks. They're so excited. And they think they've got one over on everybody. We did it. We get to say we did it. You can't hit us for supporting Democrat chairs anymore. Case closed. It's over. The problem is dozens of Republicans didn't vote for the rules, and then they went out and said, these rules give Democrats a lot more power, which they do. And then here's the other thing. The Democrats also said they got more power out of this deal. So if your Republican state representative is saying, these rules are good, we stuck it to the Democrats, you need to ask them, why don't the Democrats think that? Let's go to what Representative Gene Wu said.
And I think in a time when Democrats lost seats instead of gaining them, this has been really a yeoman's effort to negotiate all these different changes and to at least make sure that Democrats have some role in this process. And I know that there's people out there who are very unhappy about it.
Notice how Gene Wu's language is very in line with what Jared Patterson said when he laid out his amendment, that he implies that this is some negotiation. He, in fact, basically calls Todd Hunter a liar. And I'm not calling Todd Hunter a liar. Gene Wu's calling him a liar. Gene Wu says we carefully negotiated all this. And you should be proud because we got something out of it. Todd Hunter says, I wanted everybody to see these rules at the same time. Let's listen to what Representative Ramon Romero from Fort Worth had to say about these rules.
Today, and the people of Texas should be really proud of the Democrats that stood strong and have a lot to bring home today because of now the positions and the powers that were gained through vice chairmanships. They're not chairmanships, but we have a greater role to play, and we're ready to play it, and we thank everyone that played a role.
Now, if you are a Republican and you've watched the Texas House, you might have come to realize that only the Texas House could come up with a way to ban Democrat chairs and give Democrats more power. Only in the Texas House could they find a way to ban Democrat chairs in a way that every Democrat votes for it and says they got a good deal out of it. And then the Burrows supporters that are Republicans are going to their Republicans going, I don't know what you want. You're so unreasonable. You asked me to ban Democrat chairs. I banned Democrat chairs. You're still mad at me? Oh, maybe you don't know what you're talking about. That's basically the tone that all of those Republicans have taken since the rules passed. It's a gaslighting of sorts. I did exactly what you wanted me to do. Why are you upset? And again, why I'm encouraged is that so many of you realize and know that what you care about is the power that Democrats have in the Texas House. And if the Democrats have more power, then Republican policy will continue to be thwarted. And that's what we're going to fight against. This session, we have an opportunity to either pass a significant amount of conservative policy, or the Texas House can continue to be the chamber that stands up against much of the Republican agenda that so many conservatives have come around. I want to talk about who actually helped write these rules while they were getting negotiated behind this coalition that was negotiating them but not seeing them until 4:20 in the morning, after a quick break.
News and analysis on what's happening in Texas. End your day with daily headlines from Texas Scorecard. Every day at 5 p.m., join me, Brandon Waltons, as we recap the biggest stories of the day and talk about why they matter to you. From the state capitol to town hall, there's no shortage of events happening. Keep up with it all. Watch and subscribe to Daily Headlines from Texas Scorecard.
If you are a Texas political insider, you know who Hugh Brady is. He is the Obama Democrat attorney who has been running the rules of the Texas House for the last several speakers and has really perverted the way the rules work. And he has gone in and basically reinterpreted the rules constantly in a way that benefits Democrats and in a way that kills much Republican policy. That's the best way to explain it. And so Hugh Brady is somebody who people have opposed for a long time. And even Dustin Burrows implied to members that Hugh Brady was going away, that Hugh Brady was not going to stay in the Texas House, that Hugh Brady was going to be nowhere near the speakership, that he was not going to be a parliamentarian. Well, in the draft rules that were filed are Hugh Brady's initials at the bottom of each page. And so Representative Toth, the next week, got up and asked, it was actually this week, he got up and asked Speaker Burrows about this. Let's go to this clip.
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
At the bottom of each of page HR3 and HR4, we see the initials SC, HLB, and TS. Does HLB refer to Hugh Brady?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
When you and I spoke last week, you told me that Hugh Brady would not be the parliamentarian. Is that still the case or not the case?
That is not a proper parliamentary inquiry.
I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, one last parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
This inquiry seeks clarification on a key detail that governs the conduct of House proceedings. Isn't knowing who the parliamentarian is the basis for a legitimate parliamentary inquiry?
State that again.
Isn't knowing who the parliamentarian is over this House a proper parliamentary inquiry? Shouldn't we know who's calling balls and strikes? I'll wait.
The rules provide that the officers of the House will be appointed, and that will be announced very soon.
So Hugh Brady is still our parliamentarian.
No permanent officers have been appointed yet for this session.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Again, already commitments. Hugh Brady won't be a parliamentarian. Well, he might be paid by the speaker. He might be writing the rules that the parliamentarians will use. He might even still work for the parliamentarian's office. He might just not be up on the dais as the parliamentarian, for all we know, right? We don't know where Hugh Brady is. We don't know if he's being paid. We don't know what he's being paid. We just know that he wrote the rules that cut the deal and gave all the power to Democrats. He was involved in that process. So the next order of business for the Texas House should be to pass a housekeeping resolution. These things often happen a day after or a day before. Okay, the rules and then the housekeeping resolution. The housekeeping resolution was filed before the rules this time because they kind of knew what they wanted to do. And it did have one controversial item that may also be unconstitutional, where they tried to give the speaker the ability to hire legal representation for the Texas House to take various positions. Many people think that this is basically due to the bipartisan Democrat-led coalition that is trying to protect a child murderer. And so the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee has been engaged in a lawfare of sorts to end to basically prevent the justice system from executing Mr. Roberson. And so that case, the Supreme Court, I broke it down in our show, but the Supreme Court came down and basically said the Texas House has really acted outside of its jurisdiction and abused its authority. And what the Texas House wants to do is have the ability to, when the Attorney General doesn't represent the House, basically just have their entire little AG's office in the Texas House. And so that was one controversial part in the housekeeping resolution, and I believe they were working to get that out. But there would be many other amendments as well in housekeeping. One would be what Nancy Mace just did at a federal level to say the restrooms that are directly controlled by the Texas House are going to be governed by your biological males in the males restrooms, biological females in the female restrooms. There's also work by Janice Holt to put up the 10 Commandments in the classroom. So putting up the 10 Commandments in the Texas House chamber. Forgive me. The Texas House killed legislation last session that would have put the 10 Commandments into classrooms. That is legislation I do believe will pass even under Burrows and his Democrat-led coalition, because there's certain things they're going to do. And I talked about that last week, Chinaland, 10 Commandments, school choice, other things like that I think any Texas House under any speakership will pass into law. The question is going to be how many other things do they kill? But Janice Holt has a great amendment that said, hey, if we're going to push legislation to put the 10 Commandments up in the classrooms, shouldn't the 10 Commandments be up in the chamber, right? Representative Schatzline had an amendment that talked about making sure that alcohol was not consumed on the floor of the Texas House, which, by the way, is really necessary because, unfortunately, people talk about this. I mean, there are individuals that are completely intoxicated on budget night. It's crazy. And you just go down the list and you realize there were dozens of conservative policies that could have been considered in conjunction with the housekeeping resolution. So with the rules, the decision was, hey, let's just bring it up, tell everyone they were all given it at 420 because that's how fairness works, even though now everybody's going to say they negotiated these things well before. And so with the housekeeping resolution, how are you going to do it? And here's Burrows' problem with the housekeeping resolution. There isn't a ban on Democrat chairs in the housekeeping resolution, okay? It's just the housekeeping resolution. So if a Republican member votes to kill all of these amendments on housekeeping, they don't have a cool, beautiful graphic that they can send into their district to say, here's all the cool stuff we did with the housekeeping resolution. I swear I didn't kill all these conservative policies and procedures. So for housekeeping, it's a little more complex. And here's what they've decided. Well, before I tell you what they decided, let's just go to a clip where Representative Mike Alcott asked Dustin Burrows if the members were going to vote on housekeeping.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Yes. Will we be taking up House Resolution 3 this session?
Mr. Guerin has informed the chair that he will not seek recognition on that particular House resolution.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Does a change to the operational budget for the House require a vote by the members of this body?
The rules adopted last week, which would remain the same from previous sessions, continue to provide the House committee broad abilities to adopt budgets on that.
So, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
If we do not consider H.R. 3, the housekeeping resolution, will the members of the House have an opportunity to vote on how these funds are allocated within the House?
You are encouraged to visit with the House Committee on House Administration when they're appointed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
The problem for Burrows is that if he asks all of his Republicans to kill all of these conservative amendments on housekeeping, then they don't also have this cool little, cherry or carrot to throw out there as a distraction to all the conservative policies and procedures they just killed. So instead, he just says, we're not voting on that thing. Now, I've talked to members who have been there for a very, very long time, some of the most senior members of the Texas legislature, and they do not remember a time that the chamber did not vote on a housekeeping resolution. They've always voted on a housekeeping resolution. This is how the process works. You vote on rules, you vote on housekeeping, and then you get to work to move as much policy through in the short period of time that you have. That's it. That's the Texas House. But not in the new Texas House. That was a deliberative Texas House body under Dade Phelan, Dennis Bonnen, and Joe Strauss and Tom Craddock, which seems a little ironic to describe the Strauss, Bonnen, Phelan regime as deliberative. Because with them, what they would do is the speaker would be the one to kind of be the sin eater. The speaker would say, oh, that amendment is not germane. Oh, that amendment doesn't work. Well, I'm not going to let you vote on it. Or what they did, they ruled the ban on Democrat chairs like, oh, it's a violation of the housekeeping resolution. They passed the housekeeping resolution first last time so that they could put this little sentence in that they then said made the rules, the vote on banning Democrat chairs, illegal. We can't vote on it. See, Dade would be the one to make those decisions and determinations. Burrows believes he's come up with a better plan. Make the entire chamber vote to silence debate, and or just don't bring things up at all so that nobody has to vote on anything. According to Dustin Burrows, and this is going to get to the Democrat little giveaway, Chairman Hunter said in the rules, he talked about how the vice chairs are going to get money. And that's an odd thing to say because the rules don't give anybody money. They don't give the office budgets. They don't give vice chair budgets. So this should be something we debate in housekeeping. This is another real problem they don't want to have to deal with. They don't want the members to have to vote on giving Democrats $2.5 million a year in new staff costs for vice chairs. They don't want them to do that. So what they're going to do is they're going to say that whoever Burrows designates the House admin chair can determine how much money to give the Democrats. That's what they're going to do. And they're just going to give Democrats a lot of money that no member has to vote on giving. An entire new line item of the budget that no member's ever voting on. So if you voted for the rules, you can say, I didn't vote to give Democrats any money. And then you go, well, how are you going to vote on housekeeping? Well, we didn't vote on housekeeping. Well, what about the House admin chair? Well, he gave the Democrats all the money. Well, why did he do that? I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. See, imagine a Republican that supported Burrows. They can now say, I voted to ban Democrat chairs, even though they also gave Democrats a lot of power. They can say, I don't support giving them millions of dollars, but they never have to vote on it, so they don't have to align themselves with leadership or not. The House admin chair can give it, and a Burrows Republican can tell their Republican voters, I don't like that we gave Democrats all this money. But they also voted for the guy who appointed that person as House admin chair and cut the deal that was evidently never cut because nobody saw the rules until 4:20 a.m., remember? So, needless to say, the last week has been a pretty remarkable week in the Texas House of Representatives. Now, the reason you should be encouraged is that the Texas Senate was literally holding hearings on bills while all this was happening. They were holding hearings on legislation. And on Sunday, the governor will give his State of the State address. And in his State of the State address, he will designate certain policies emergency items. He could designate 3 policies emergency items. He could designate 15 policies as emergency items. He could designate items and policies as emergency items after his State of the State as well, but likely he will do it during his State of the State. And if he does, here's what you need to know. The Texas House and the Texas Senate cannot vote on all the other bills for the first 45 days of session, but they can vote on the governor's emergency items. So when he designates them as such, the Texas Senate and the Texas House could both immediately get to work hearing this legislation, working on this legislation, and getting this legislation moving forward in the process. They could. And I believe the Texas Senate will. And I hope the Texas House does as well. Because what the Texas House has done in the past is taken all those items and move them to the end of the calendar so that they can help eat up valuable days that could be spent passing other Republican policy. And that would be unfortunate if they did that. The reason you should be encouraged is because the Texas Senate is already holding hearings on legislation. And they are ready to vote that legislation out after the governor decrees them as emergency items. The Republican Party of Texas is fully engaged in battling for the advancement of conservative policy. And you, the people of Texas, are more engaged in this process than ever before. I don't even know all these people that are engaged and sharing information and know the difference between a powerful vice chair and now every one of those people being mandated. I want to explain one thing to you very quickly. And I know this has been a little bit more technical of an episode because it's the rules and the housekeeping and the process and the procedure. If the vice chair of state affairs can take Democrat bills and fill up that committee's time, that kills a significant amount of Republican policy. And it gives a lot of policy a chance to pass that might not have otherwise be considered. On the flip side, if all Democrats can do is have 6 or 7 more medium and smaller chairs, they can't gum up the other 20 committees. Now, what they can do is what we've talked about them doing, which is why they shouldn't have Democrat chairs. They can kill certain Republican bills that are in their committees as a form of punishment to people. Hey, you acted, you passed that Republican policy, you voted on that amendment, I'm going to kill your bill, right? And I'm the chair and I can do that. So you don't want them to be the chairs. But I do believe that Democrats do get more influence on this process there because of the additional power they have. I think it is better for the Democrat Party to be able to schedule a hearing in any committee they want on any bill they want, as opposed to being relegated to 8 committees where they're given the full king-like authority. Time will tell. And we will definitely keep you updated as to what the Democrats do with all this new power that they were given. But do not forget that we have 4 months to go and a real opportunity to advance incredibly necessary Republican policy. And if you follow the Trump administration, you'll know that's what it looks like when Republicans take hold of power and actually start wielding it for the people that elected them to actually the offices that they hold. And in the Texas Senate, they seem to have a similar approach. We will see from our governor on Sunday what policies he is designated emergency items, and I will keep you up to date on all those things that are happening. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.